We've got a few people joining us now. Thank you for joining us for our webinar. We'll be starting very shortly. We've got 35, 37 people on. Hello, welcome to our webinar today. Just remember to mute yourselves. I think you probably will be automatically muted, but down the bottom of your screen, you might notice that there is a Q&A and a chat button. The Q&A is where you can put in some questions for our panelists later on if you've got any questions, and we'll be answering those at the end of the session, so just a note to put them there. And the chat function at the beginning, I'll actually be asking people to say where they're coming from, so you can say your name and say what of the Aboriginal lands that you're coming from. So today I'm on Awabakal land, so I would write, hi, I'm Fiona and I'm on Awabakal land. So that will be when we start shortly. Okay, we might get started. Thanks all for joining us today on this Hunter Environmental Institute webinar. We'll be focusing on careers in the environment today. I'm Fiona Mackay and I'm part of the committee for the HEI, and we're very pleased to welcome you to this webinar with our panelists and guest speakers. So we hope that you enjoy it. As we gather virtually today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which each of us live and work. For those in Newcastle, this is the Awabakal people. You might like to share in the chat button the traditional custodians of the land where you are joining us from today. This webinar is brought to you by HEI. HEI was established in 1988 to provide a forum for the interaction of people working in environmentally oriented fields in the Hunter region. HEI is a non-profit organisation. Our major events are regular seminars or webinars at the moment, featuring presentations by guest speakers on a specific issue within a broad range of environmental topics. Memberships are available for corporate members, individuals and students, and helps to cover event costs for seminars and scholarships for students through the University of Newcastle. If you're interested in getting involved with the HEI committee or have suggestions for events, please contact us via Facebook or the HEI website, or just sign up for our newsletter for notifications of upcoming events. We would like to extend our thanks to the University of Newcastle, our webinar host, and to our gold corporate sponsor, NGH. NGH is a full-service planning and environmental consultancy with a strong focus on renewables and conservation. Since 1992, NGH has helped deliver over 7,000 megawatts of renewable infrastructure, and as industry leaders are proud to assist in the transition to a sustainable future. With expertise in ecology, heritage, town planning, environmental assessment, social impact assessment and community engagement, bushfire and contamination, from planning to construction and operation, NGH can assist you. For more information, see their website, www.nghconsulting.com.au. So as I said earlier, today's presentation will be looking at careers in the environment. We'll be hearing from 6 wonderful speakers today. We have Melissa Moore from the University of Newcastle and 5 panelists who are currently working in a variety of environmental careers. We have Rhys Wilson, Molly Walker, Jacob Jones, Zeina Jokadar, and Jayme Lennon. Just a reminder during the presentation to keep your microphones on mute and your video turned off until our question time. And questions can be written in the Q&A section as we go along. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Melissa Moore from the University of Newcastle. She is a Senior Manager of Employability and Enterprise Service. Melissa has a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Newcastle, a Graduate Diploma of Education from the University of New England, and a Postgraduate Diploma of Education from Australian Catholic University. In her current role, Melissa manages the UON Careers Service. So I'd like to hand over to Melissa. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Fiona, and hi, everybody. It's lovely that you've come along to this afternoon. It shows that you're taking your career planning seriously, which could only make a career service member very happy. I am also going to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Pambalong clan of the Awabakal people on whose land I am today. I've never felt so lucky and blessed, I think, to be part of such a beautiful country. During lockdown, we've done lots of exploring and walking and being on the beaches, and yeah, truly grateful to be part of this amazing space. And also to extend my respects to the traditional owners of the land where you are today, and to pay my respects to any Indigenous people who are part of today's workshop. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk to you a bit about what it is that we know that makes students employable. Because regardless of what program you're studying, there are certain things that you can do while you progress through your degree to ensure that you can enunciate a point of difference when you're speaking to employers as you transition out into the workspace, or even while you're applying for work while you move through your degree. A lot of people talk about the future of work and they make it sound spooky and scary, but it's really not that scary. There's a whole lot of research going on that tells us things that pretty much we already know, and to a certain extent we're already experiencing. What we do know about the future of work is that it'll be highly automated, subject to globalization. It'll be more fast-paced than traditional roles back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But that's happening already, so it's no big deal. And a lot of people who are already, well, you are already operating in this environment, both in part-time work or in community activities that you're involved in, or just being a student at the University of Newcastle. You're more connected globally now than you ever were before, and you're also experiencing high levels of automation in the way that you engage in a Zoom meeting. Your exams are marked. You are doing group assignments using particular platforms. And this is none of this is new. None of it's scary. It's all fine. But the thing that you do need to be thinking about as you move towards your future is the skills that are going to be required. So being in a degree, you're being taught all of the technical knowledges and skills that you require, and industry expect you to have when you move into jobs in the environmental sciences or environmental engineering. And to a certain extent, employers look at graduates as almost an homogenous group in the sense that really is only differentiated based on your GPA. So they'll know that some of you are slightly more skilled at particular technical areas because your GPA might be slightly higher. It might also speak to your ability to prepare for and perform in exams and assessments. But the things that employers can't tell immediately about graduates are about their employability skills. And employability skills are often referred to as soft skills. People will call them generic skills, but they've become increasingly important when it comes to being competitive in your transition into the professional workplace. This is increasingly the case, though, over the last probably 10, 15 years. This is a McKinsey report that came out in 2018, and they took a look at some metadata and analysed what was happening in terms of the demand for workforce skills. Those blue blobs represent the skills that were required in 2016, and based on some forecasting, the clear circles are the skills that are guessed to be after in 2030. What we can see is that the demand for skills is moving from things that you can do with your hands to the stuff that you do with your heart and your head. And so in 2016, the demand for physical and manual skills was overwhelming. And really something that employers were absolutely after, even though at that point we thought we were talking about the future. But as you can see, as we move along through these skill sets towards those heart and head type skills, that need is actually what's predominantly being called for by employers. So we know that employers are now looking at their future employees and demanding excellent cognitive thinking skills. But machines can do that also. What they're after is people who have got wonderful social and emotional skills and the technological skills, that digital capability that it's very difficult to teach artificial intelligence to anticipate. A lot of people refer to this as a T-shaped graduate. So if we start talking about employability skills and looking at you being somebody who has the communication skills, the critical thinking skills, the networking skills that are required by employers beyond what you're learning in your degree, on top of that piece in your degree, it's been described as producing a T-shaped graduate, and our Vice-Chancellor really loves this concept. You'll probably hear it sometime in one of his speeches. Basically what it talks about is the vertical stripe of the T is the depth of knowledge that you have in your degree space. And again, your GPA is going to tell an employer about that. But you need to be just as cognizant as of the need to develop the top bar of your T, because that's where you're going to put a point of difference across in your job applications and your resumes. Employers are looking for somebody who has a cultural fit. They're looking for someone who will be able to fit within their team and communicate effectively and solve problems and translate understandings to other people and manage projects, all these sorts of things that are very hard to learn from a degree alone. And that's why we strongly encourage students to look beyond the classroom to other things that they can do, not just to plump out their resume, but also to develop and evidence the skills that we know employers are demanding. Some more evidence, the skills outlook, and this is increasingly being shown in evidence that we're getting from job application and vacancy data that's coming through. We know that the demand for skills is growing around analytical thinking and innovation skills, all the stuff that you're doing in your head, active learning and learning strategies, creative, original and initiative, creativity, originality and initiative. These are things that you need to practice, but you also need to have evidence of when you're applying for work, because they will be demanded in applications. One of the things that happened with COVID last year is that employers really began to focus in on the need for new graduates who were able to engage in complex problem solving and could demonstrate good flexibility in their approach to work. I mean, I wonder why. Look at what we've had to do over the last 12 to 18 months to adjust to this new environment. And of course, on the right-hand side there, that grey stripe talks about the declining need for reading, writing, maths, active listening skills, management of personnel skills, quality control skills. And these were things that were once in heavy demand when employers looked at who they would bring into their graduate recruitment programs. This is the most recent data I can show you. So there's this really great platform called Burning Glass. And so we put into Burning Glass environmental science and environmental engineering vacancies in the New South Wales region. And then what Burning Glass will tell us is it'll share, I guess, an assessment of the skills that are most in demand across all of those vacancies. And you can see that, yes, there are technical skills that are most in demand at the top there. And you would certainly hope that was the case. You'd want an environmental, somebody who works in the environment to have good environmental consulting skills, impact assessment skills, but you'll also see that there's things like report writing, teamwork and collaboration, budgeting, and customer service, which are still high on that skill list and quite commonly seen. And these aren't things that necessarily are taught, with the exception perhaps of report writing, taught exclusively within your degree. Teamwork and collaboration, budgeting, customer service, these things come from extracurricular experience. So things that you do outside of the classroom. So what does your T look like? And how are you going to, I guess, invest in that top stripe of your T so that you're able to demonstrate to a future employer that, hey, I've got the degree that tells you that I've got all the technical competencies, but I also have the top stripe of my T that demonstrates to you that I also have the employability skills and the ability to fit into your team and fit the puzzle that they're laying out for you. Volunteering is a great way. Don't ever let somebody tell you that it has to be paid work for you to be able to put that onto your resume and use that as part of your sales pitch to an employer. Volunteering is a great way of demonstrating that you have excellent teamwork skills, that you have the ability to problem solve, that you can use initiative, and there's lots of experiences up there that you could engage with. And I'm sure, look, you're clever people, and obviously you've all got a bit of nous in that you've come to this particular presentation this evening. But if you're looking for new inspiration, think about volunteering, because it's a really great way of showing an employer just how driven you are and how tenacious you are. And the more that you do, the more that you're able to demonstrate good time management skills, which is also in high demand. We have over 141 clubs and societies at the University of Newcastle. They're not just there for a good time, they're also there to help you develop some skills. And if you join the executive of those clubs and societies, what better way to show that you can collaborate with other people, that you can project manage, you can problem solve, than in your spare time you're involved with an association of like-minded people. And I don't think you should ever underestimate the value of part-time work. We often have students come to us who say, well, I've worked at Macca's and I have no idea how that can be relevant to the career that I've chosen. A simple retail or hospitality job is a great way of demonstrating your ability to comply with work health and safety standards, be able to undertake supervision of other staff, to follow procedures. And it's all about the way you couch those experiences in the conversation and the narrative that you direct towards an employer when you're putting together your job applications. External activity, such as sporting teams and community and professional groups like this one, are also great ways to be able to develop and evidence your employability skills. So if not just because Fiona is lovely and you're thinking that looks like a really great association to be part of, you should think about joining professional groups because it puts you around like-minded people. It'll expand your network. And if you get involved in organising some activities, it's a great way, again, of evidencing your skills and demonstrating to an employer that you are job ready. It's not going to take that long to make you fit into their puzzle because, hey, you've got the technical skills, but you also have those generic, soft employability skills that are the thing that is your point of difference when you're compared to other graduates. So I don't want to hold up the opportunity for you guys to hear from graduates who have done this already and have been able to convert their experiences into an employment outcome. What I will say though is that the Careers Service is here for you. We have an Ask a Question service that's through Career Hub. So I'm hoping most of you will have found Career Hub while you've been at university. If you haven't, just put careers into the search engine of the university's website and it's one of the main tabs. You go into Career Hub. If you've got a question to ask us, you might want to send us your job application for us to have a look over. That's fine. If you've never written a resume before, we have automatic resume creators. We have automatic resume checkers. There's all sorts of things there to help you bring your job applications together. And when you do score an interview, we also run mock interviews. We're your one-stop shop. So hopefully we'll see you guys at some point. And I'm also hoping that if you haven't already, you'll start investing some time in extracurricular activities and thinking about the things that you're doing and how that can reflect on your professional ambitions. Thanks so much, Fiona.
Thank you, Melissa. That's great and as always, very informative. I hope you all take on board some of that and we look forward to hearing from some of our other speakers and I hope that you'll get in contact with the careers people at wherever you are because not everybody's in Newcastle that's joining us today and some people might be from TAFE or from high school. So talk to your careers advisor or speak to someone at the universities or those other organisations. So thank you, Melissa. We're going to go now on to our panelists. So some real live environmental professionals like myself. I'm also an environmental professional. We've asked our panelists some questions about why did you get into your field and where did you study? How did you get into your first job? What do you do now? So if you've got any questions as we go along, remember to put them in the chat. That's fine. But our first speaker is going to be Rhys Wilson. So I'm going to get Shafan to put up the slide for Rhys. There we go, nice picture. I love pictures out in the field because that's what being an environment is. So Rhys works for Glencore as an environment and community advisor. He studied a Bachelor of Environmental Science and Management at Newcastle, majoring in sustainability and is environmental advisor at a coal mine. And I'm going to leave him to say all the rest because if I say it all, then he won't have anything to say. Thank you, Rhys.
Awesome. Thank you, Fiona, and thanks for that, Melissa. There were some really great tips there, and I wish I knew those when I was still an undergraduate. So, as Fiona said, my name is Rhys Wilson, and I'm a graduate environment and community advisor with Glencore Coal Assets Australia. So, I work at coal mines across New South Wales, and I'm currently located in an open cut coal mine in central Queensland at Ralston Open Cut. So first of all, I'll cover why I originally got into environmental science. And I finished high school in 2015 and I was a bit lost with what I wanted to do and wasn't sure what path I took. And after looking at a few different degrees, reading the program at the University of Newcastle, the environmental science program, I honestly felt like it was written for me. It just ticked all the boxes. It seemed like it was a degree and a job at the end that provided me an opportunity to work outside, which I really enjoy. It would allow me to work with people. I have a passion for plants and animals, so it was an opportunity to follow my passion. So it just ticked all the boxes, and I took the leap and I started the degree in 2016. And I decided to take a gap year, but went through and finished that 3 years later. So as I mentioned, I studied at University of Newcastle, and I did a Bachelor of Environmental Science and Management, and I majored in sustainability. After university, I ended up getting on the graduate program, but there was a number of steps I took prior to finishing that ensured that I stood out from other graduates. So Melissa mentioned a number of tips, and that was just getting your name out there. So I sent emails to everyone, local council, consultants, private industry. I just bombarded people with emails, professors, just to try to get my name out there and do some volunteer work. So I was lucky enough to work with Lake Macquarie City Council as a student sustainability officer for 12 months. And although it necessarily wasn't my passion, it was learning all those professional skills, those soft skills, how to work in a professional environment, how to communicate like a professional, how to write reports, because that was my first time working full time. After that, I was lucky enough to get some vacation work with AECOM as an environmental monitorer. So going out and doing groundwater sampling, air quality sampling, and things like that. And I'm certain that the work I did with Lake Macquarie Council certainly helped me get my role with AECOM. And then after my 12 weeks with AECOM, I applied for a role as a graduate with Glencore, and I was successful. And again, I'm certain that what I did with AECOM led me to my role with Glencore. So you finish university, and as Melissa said, you all look like the same. You're all graduates. You've all studied similar subjects and may not have too much experience. And I believe the work I did as an undergraduate, both volunteer work and my vacation work, certainly led up to standing out from the crowd and putting my name out there. And I had a good looking resume because of that work. And I was lucky enough to get on the Glencore graduate program as well. And that's kind of slingshot my career in the right direction. So in terms of what I do now and what a career in environmental science looks like, for me, certainly no 2 days are the same. So as I mentioned, I work in open cut coal mines. I'm currently in Queensland, but I'm moving back to New South Wales and taking a full-time role as an environmental advisor at a coal mine in New South Wales. And the day-to-day is report writing and consolidating monitoring data. It might go on to going out and doing inspections in the field, doing environmental inspections to ensure the site's in accordance with management plans and project approvals. I also do lots of work with rehabilitation. So as I mentioned earlier, my passion is certainly plants and animals and in the ecology sector. So the way I look at it, I get to look after some of New South Wales' biggest gardens when we're doing mine rehabilitation. So I oversee the seeding and planting work and the ongoing monitoring and maintenance of mine rehabilitation as well. So whether it's vertebrate pest management or weed management. So this role that I'm currently in, as Melissa mentioned, it requires a lot of good project management skills and time management skills, and working in a team and collaborating with other departments. And the soft skills really shine out in my role. So I was lucky. I learned lots of technical skills at uni, but since I've graduated, I've certainly learned that soft skills are extremely important in my role that I currently do as well. So it's just making sure you develop those soft skills as well. So that's pretty much my backstory, what I studied and how I got there, and what I do now. So certainly if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask, but that's pretty much all from me.
Thank you so much, Rhys. And just remember, you can put that in the chat if you've got any questions, or in the Q&A, sorry, if you've got any questions. Thank you very much, Rhys. We're going on to our next speaker, which is Molly Walker. Molly is a water network engineer at Hunter Water Corporation. Molly studied a Bachelor of Engineering, Environmental and Bachelor of Science at University of Newcastle, and her current role is managing the day-to-day operations of the water and recycled water network. So I'm going to leave that to Molly. And Shafan, if you want to put up the slide for a bit and then take it down so we can see that lovely photo of Molly out in the field with lots of water. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Fiona. So like Fiona said, I studied at UON as well, and I loved it. And the first question we got asked was, why did we get into our field? So my field's obviously a utility company or managing a natural resource like water. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that I had this burning desire or burning love for being in a utility. That wasn't the case. the reason I got into the field was through a whole series of domino events, and basically a great opportunity presented itself when I finished my degree and I took it. So I don't want you guys to think that you have to have this great purpose by the time you finish your degree. But a better question, I guess, is why have I stayed in this field? So ever since I graduated and started at Hunter Water, I haven't left because I love it so much. So I've stayed in the water utility space because working for a company like Hunter Water means that you can have a positive impact on the environment no matter what your job is. So this is actually my third job with Hunter Water. And I guess a few of the things that I've got to do in terms of the environment is when I was a catchment engineer, we got to clear a whole lot of Pinus radiata, so, weed species that were encroaching on our beautiful drinking water catchments. My second job was a civil engineer, and you get a lot of autonomy as a civil engineer because you're managing your own projects. And some of the things I did was when we go through and label all of our valves, I decided to use a company that produced posts out of recycled plastic. So instead of using just a general material that was standard, I made the decision to say, no, we're going to be using recycled plastic here. And so we diverted 2 tons of soft plastic from the environment. And then something else, like being a civil engineer, when you're refurbishing something like a sewer rising main, I decided that we're going to be doing another method of replacing this main. So instead of digging it up and destroying a natural environment, we used new technology that was more expensive but better for the environment. So those are the kind of things that working for somewhere like Hunter Water, who support the environment and support managing the environment well and really value that, those are some of the things that I absolutely love. So I've stayed in this field because Hunter Water supports all of my dreams in just incorporating environmental management into any job that's there. So my first job was with Hunter Water, and how I got in was anyone in the room that's doing engineering will know that you do an FYP, so a final year project at the end, and you basically get this list of topics of what you can do for your final year project. And when it came down to picking, I didn't really like any of them. I was like, not really interested. So I decided to go outside of engineering and find someone in my science degree that I really liked. And I just went up to him and said, hey, would you be interested in supervising me for a project? And he was like, yep, why not? Let's do it. And by the way, I do industry projects, if you're interested, with Hunter Water. And I was like, yep, absolutely. That sounds like me. So I got into my first job with Hunter Water basically by doing an industry final year project with them for my honours year. And I met people obviously in the business throughout that year. And then by the time I finished my degree, a maternity leave relief contract came up. So it was only a short-term contract. It was 12 months. But I ended up getting that. And then you sort of just move across and eventually you get a full-time position. So that's how I got in. And what do I do now? So like I said, I've had 3 roles at Hunter Water already. So I was a catchment engineer. So anything that falls onto our beautiful catchments, you're in charge of getting it into the dam. So getting enough water, but making sure that water quality is good enough for our treatment plants as well. And then second of all, I was a civil engineer. And then now I am what is called a water network operations engineer. And I've only been in this role for 2 weeks now, so it's very new, but basically you're in charge of anything from our water treatment plant to your tap. So making sure that the water quality is correct, making sure that you have a high enough pressure. So it's a very reactive job, which I really, really enjoy. So any big water main breaks, you're in charge of minimizing the damage there because people probably aren't aware, but when you get a massive water main break, that's actually a big environmental incident. Same as like a sewer overflow, because of the chlorine in the water, it's actually quite destructive for the natural environment. So there's a lot of environmental management there with minimizing water main breaks and figuring out where the pressures should be in the network and what parts of the network can cope with varying pressures. And then, yeah, like I said, the water quality side, so making sure that there's no pathogens or anything in our drinking water so that it's safe for you guys. So, yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Molly. And we need to see that, Shafan, get that screen up of showing Molly that lovely picture. We're just pulling things up and down so we can see people on the big screen. But thank you so much, Molly, for your presentation. And we'll be hearing more from you at the end when we have some more questions. Oh, there we are. Except we've got the wrong mode, but that's okay. As you can see, we've got coming up next is Jacob, who's going to be our next speaker, Jacob Jones. Jacob is an environmental engineer for the Newcastle Council, or City of Newcastle, it's called now, isn't it? Jacob has a Bachelor of Engineering and a Master's in Environmental Management and Sustainability from the University of Newcastle. So, Jacob, can you take it away? You've got some slides you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, thank you. I will put a few slides up. I threw a few pictures together. Let's see if I can click the right button here. Is that one working?
Hang on, it's coming. There you go. Great.
Great. Thank you, Fiona, and thank you to the speakers before as well. It's been really good to hear some of your stories and reflect on the fact that, you know, we all go through some of the same things, and in fact, you know, going from study to the industry isn't so scary, particularly when you have the support of, you know, your peers. And I know that you're never really alone in these things, so don't be too daunted by that fact if some of you are nearing the end of your studies. So my name's Jacob Jones. I am currently an asset engineer for environmental assets at the City of Newcastle, City of Newcastle Council. I was interested in a career in the environment, I think, from a young age. I was always fascinated by earth sciences. So everything from, you know, volcanoes to the weather to the ocean. I just found the way that, you know, planet Earth works in these complex ways really interesting. So that led me to pursuing a degree in environmental engineering when I had finished high school. So I moved to Newcastle to study there at the University of Newcastle. Now that's a 4-year degree. About 2.5 years through that degree, I was fortunate enough to apply for just a casual position as an undergraduate environmental engineer at a local consulting firm. And was successful in, I guess, getting that position. And something that I think has been brought up before in this Zoom chat this afternoon that I really resonate with is the fact that, you know, our GPAs are one thing, but by all accounts, I was a middle of the pack in terms of my GPA. But I really worked hard on learning to present myself, and I worked really hard on researching not only what the job was going to be about, but also how to do an interview well and how to treat an interview as a conversation, not necessarily a test. And by turning, you know, that interview, I've had many interviews since then, but turning that interview into a more of a free-flowing conversation, I was really able to sell myself. And to my surprise, I was picked, and I had that job for the remainder of my degree. That job was in contamination assessment and remediation for a local consulting company called GHD. So I learned a lot in that role about, you know, testing groundwater, testing surface water, doing a lot of soil samples, taking that to the lab, and then speaking with some of the more senior engineers and scientists at the company and trying to, I guess, come up with ways of innovative environmental remediation solutions for our clients. And it was that position for about 15 months, 16 months, I think I had it, that gave me the, I guess, resume boost and those interpersonal skill sets and those communication skill sets that aren't necessarily reflected, again, on your academic transcript, that allowed me to then go to the City of Newcastle when they had a graduate program that was advertised. A lot of graduate programs, including the City of Newcastle's graduate program, are quite well structured things where they sort of take you through different teams, and you're allowed to see a lot of the organisation. You're allowed to try and find what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you're passionate about, and what you might like to try further. And I've been incredibly lucky in my career so far to have had such a broad range of experiences, and I'll just take you through a few of those very quickly. So when I started at the City of Newcastle, I worked in the stormwater team. So I did things like stormwater improvement projects, as you can see from the photo on the right, trying to reduce flooding in the city, particularly in heavy rain. On the top left-hand screen, left-hand part of the screen, you can see what's called a gross pollutant trap. So that's basically trying to remove rubbish and litter that might have fallen into the stormwater network. And it basically works the same way as a first flush system that you might see for leaves on a roof. And basically it tries to clean up our waterways before they end up going into the more naturalised channels, before they end up either in sort of underwater assets or in urban creeks. And then in the bottom corner here, although you can't really see it, there's actually what's called a tide gate there. A big problem we're having in a lot of low-lying areas, including Newcastle, is sea level rise. And although our stormwater networks try and take rainwater away, sometimes when they're really low down in terms of their relative height, the sea level, particularly at high tides, it comes up the stormwater network and can lead to some localised flooding. So we're trying to find ways of making sure that stormwater can get out of the pipe systems, but seawater can't come up them. So there's some of the really interesting jobs that I did in that first 12 months. Then I sort of took probably what I'd say is the biggest leap of faith I've had in my career, and I actually went and worked in waste management for 2 years. And I really credit this, I guess, sort of stint in the graduate program as probably my favourite and where I learnt the most. And again, I learnt the most not from necessarily environmental skill sets, but from learning how to talk to an excavator driver, or learning how to have a difficult conversation with a contractor who didn't want to work hard enough, or learning what goes into talking to government authorities when we're trying to get big environmental projects like waste management projects certified. On the left-hand side, you can see the main project that I worked on was the construction of a new landfill cell. And I was fortunate enough to be the environmental engineer working on that, ensuring the environmental compliance of the project. That was actually the single largest construction project that the council has ever undertaken. So that was a good resume booster, that one. And then on the right-hand side, and sort of a bit of a same but opposite, although it doesn't look like it, that's actually the council's former landfill cell located in Shortland before our current landfill opened up. And it was really interesting to look through the environmental legislation sort of administered by the New South Wales EPA and look at between now and the 70s, we have come a long way in terms of environmental legislation and regulation, but unfortunately, particularly in places like Newcastle, we're still learning a lot of the stuff that we did 50, 60 years ago wasn't that great for the environment. And now we're trying to come up with ways of, using science and engineering and communication to develop ways to right the wrongs of the environment. So I spent a couple of years out here as well, learning how to do site investigations to inform what was then going to end up being the design of how we were going to treat that site. Then finally, I went back to the environment team after a short stint in environmental planning, where I was one of the council's authors of the Stockton Coastal Management Program. That was probably the single most challenging thing I've done. I learned a lot about environmental science, but also learned a lot about politics. That was really eye-opening, and I'm sure a lot of you will have that journey as well. It is incredibly interesting to learn how people work and those different types of nuances in those industries, but they're challenges that everybody faces regardless of what industry they're in. And then after that, I was certainly at a point in time where I was able to apply for a position outside of the graduate program, and used all of the experiences that I'd had in planning and construction and environmental management in general, and was able to secure a position as an environmental asset engineer, where I currently do things like try to minimise the impact of large state developments on our precious remaining bushland. I am the engineer in charge of constructing coastal protection assets. I manage things like beach scraping, which is where we try and take sand from eroding beaches and push them up to the dunes to try and offer a little bit of protection for what it's worth next time there's an erosion, a big wave storm event. And then I do a lot of other sort of environmental asset management things, like keeping track of the conditions of our seawalls or urban creeks, for example. And that's kind of how I've ended up here. So it's been one long journey, learning new things, every day, but certainly a journey that I'm very grateful for, and I'm looking forward to whatever's next. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all that, Jacob. That was great, and loved all your images. Perfect. We're going to now hear from Zeina Jokadar. Zeina is a senior environment consultant at NGH. Zeina studied a Bachelor of Science majoring in Resource and Environmental Management at the University of Michigan. And in her current role, Zeina prepares environmental impact assessments for renewable energy and agency infrastructure projects, as well as marine ecological assessments. So I'll leave it with you, Zeina. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. That's quite a resume everyone's been talking about, so I hope I can match that. So as Fiona said, I worked with NGH. I'm an environmental consultant, and my background is mostly to do with aquatics and marine ecology. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Resource and Environmental Management from the University of Michigan, all the way in the States. And here I am in Australia. So I'll get to how I came to this country after a little bit. So the reason I got into environmental sciences was because I like biology, I like science, I like learning about how the environment and ecosystems interact with each other. And especially, I like to know what it is that people do that screws it all up. So my studies led me, while I was at university, I did a lot of training and volunteered quite a bit with various professors doing works in labs and helping them with their research. And the way I landed my first job was actually thanks to a tricky little way that one of my professors taught me how to remove ear stones from fish without completely butchering the fish. And that got the attention of a laboratory in Florida, Mote Marine Laboratory. They were interested in how I could do that. So that was my first internship job. And through that work and doing other aspects of marine surveys and working in the lab, I then got the interest of another company all the way in the UAE. They hired me to do coastal mapping and water quality monitoring and all kinds of other outdoor work. And it just, from each job subsequently, there were little things that I learned along the way that were not necessarily specifically related to the original job description, but that just gave me an edge, something more rounded, something that in my job description and my abilities just fulfill the gap that the next company was looking for, or that would help the next company open up other business opportunities. So it was always an interesting domino effect from one job to the next, what it was that I learned that then opened doors to the next job. And so I worked in the States, then I worked in the UAE for quite some time. And through all those different jobs, it just went further and further from being in the field and doing a lot of hands-on work to becoming more of an assessor and working with lots of specialists in different types of assessments that had to do with noise or hydrodynamic modeling or visual impact assessments. And that brought me to Australia, where I now do environmental impact assessments for renewable energy projects, large infrastructure projects, and basically preparing impact assessment reports that analyze how the construction and the operation of these projects is going to impact the environment, going to impact people, society, social values, and we develop what we call mitigation measures then to either avoid those types of impacts or mitigate those impacts. So there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of talking with people from various backgrounds, engineers, biologists, and obviously the agencies to come up with a collaborative approach to managing these things. And it's different to being in the field, but it's quite fulfilling in the sense that you learn about how people deal with issues and how people come up with different solutions that satisfies everybody else. So that's my journey in my field of work today. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeina. That's great. It's always great to hear people's stories. I work with Zeina, so it's wonderful to hear people sharing their passion for the environment and how they got somewhere. You don't always hear those stories, so, and it's great for all our speakers and everybody to be sharing in that. So thank you, Zeina. Our next speaker, our final speaker today, is Jayme Lennon. Jayme is a Senior Conservation Planning Officer at the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, also known as DPIE. I don't know if they call it DPIE or what they do, but that's what I call it. Jayme reviews biodiversity assessments for rezoning and major development applications and assists with regional conservation planning activities. And prior to working at DPIE, she worked as an ecological consultant and she's worked with National Parks and Wildlife Service and in bush regen. So thank you, Jayme.
Thank you. Yeah, DPIE, whatever you want to call us, I think we respond to just about anything these days. Yeah, so when I started out leaving high school, I actually had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I ended up deciding that I know I love biology, I love working with environmental issues, and I also love animals. So I picked a Bachelor of Natural Science at UWS, which is now WSU. And yeah, that degree actually had a lot of flexibility in electives. So that's where I started doing some ecology units, and that's what really just drew my interest and caught my attention, and I've been working towards that ever since, really. Once I finished my degree, I actually wasn't one of the lucky ones to pick up a graduate program or anything like that. So I found getting my first job really challenging. What I ended up doing was going through every job advertisement that was possibly related to something that I was interested in, finding out who those companies were, and just trying to contact them directly and cold calling, really. And so that's what got me into my first job as a bush regeneration worker. And that's where I actually got a lot of really handy plant identification and fieldwork skills. What I also did in that process was made contact with a National Parks and Wildlife Officer. And through there, I got a lot of volunteer experience, which led into a couple of contracts, which was really interesting. I got a lot of field work, a lot of work with microbats, which is a really handy skill to have if you want to work as a fauna ecologist. I actually ended up going back to uni. I went to Macquarie Uni and finished a Masters of Conservation Biology and backed that up with a Masters of Research in groundwater ecology. So that diversified my skill set even more. And yeah, from there, I got my job as a fauna ecologist with WSP, which was lots and lots of fun, lots of field work. I got to work all the way around the state, from the border of South Australia all the way up into northern New South Wales, which was really fun. And so now, as Fiona said, I'm a Senior Conservation Planning Officer with the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. So in my job now, I review biodiversity assessments for rezoning and major development applications, and I get to provide comments on regional plans and strategies, and working with local councils and other state departments. I also get to go out into the field occasionally, not as much as I used to, but I do get to go out and do site inspections just to check that survey efforts are consistent with our biodiversity assessment methods. So my job actually involves, as a lot of other people have touched on, a lot of skills outside of my technical skill set. Particularly now, I have to communicate with members of the public, proponents, and other ecological consultants. So there's definitely a lot of work or a lot of value in communication skills and being able to communicate directly and effectively to get the outcomes that you want to achieve. Yeah, I really enjoy my job now. I really enjoy being able to use my skill set to hopefully influence better outcomes for biodiversity. Yeah, and I'd just like to, kind of touch on for people that, my career path definitely wasn't linear, but being able to have experience in a whole range of different aspects of ecology and conservation is actually really useful. So don't turn down those small roles or chance roles or volunteer roles. Like the skills that you gain from those are really important, no matter how big that job is in the scheme of things. Yeah, that's my little spiel.
Thank you, Jayme. Great advice. And plant ID skills are very highly sought after. So if
Oh,
you get those,
yes,
you're in the running for some work.
yes.
So that's the end of our speakers sharing their individual components. But just if you want to, or the speakers want to put their videos back on, is any of you'd like to add anything else about our last question, which is, what is the single best piece of advice you give to a soon to graduate student to help them get their foot in the door of their dream career?
Yeah, I could quickly touch on what I would recommend. Just two things that come to mind. First of all, it's a small industry. So it's just all about networking. It's a great first step of coming to events like this. I'm sure everyone else would, all the other panelists would agree. Like I've got LinkedIn and would more than happy for people to add me. And there's one connection already. It's about going to these sorts of events. Your lecturers are a really great resource for that as well. So Troy's a friend of mine. I met him through uni, and I'm always happy to go to him for questions or if I need anything like that. And that's a great way to get a bit of work experience and things like that. I just use those connections. And what Jayme just touched on as well is no matter what the job may be, it may seem small, but they're great skills that you'll develop. And my time at Lake Macquarie Council as a student sustainability officer, working on similar things that Jacob touched on in terms of tidal inundation, I never thought they would send me where I am now. So I'm extremely grateful for taking those small roles, and they were unpaid, but it all counts for something. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thank you, Rhys. Anyone else?
Just to add to what Rhys was saying, I think the biggest lesson that I probably took away from the last sort of 5-6 years was to not be afraid to take a risk if you're offered an opportunity. I remember when I left stormwater and environment to go and work in waste management, I was like, various waste management, but it was actually the best thing that has ever happened to me career-wise. So sometimes an opportunity might present itself as a bit not exactly what you think you're after, but don't be afraid to take it if you think it might be all right. And sometimes it can really pay off as being a fantastic experience that'll then give you the tools you need to go to the next thing, because life is just one, moving from one thing to the next.
Yeah, just building on what everyone else has had to say, something that I would definitely do is don't be afraid to hear the word no or get a no response, and don't let that stop you from keeping trying. Just because one company doesn't have the ability to take you on doesn't mean that no one else does, or no one else will see what individual skills you have to offer. And also don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Like if you get a guest lecturer who's talking about something that just really works for you and you're really interested in, ask them questions, send them an email after the lecture. Like really just don't be afraid to show that you're interested. Like that's, really important networking opportunities that you can have there.
And good feedback for them too. That shows people listening. They need support too. Any other suggestions from people? Molly, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think it sort of bounces off what Jacob was kind of saying about taking risks. But I would say don't put too much pressure on yourself for trying to find the dream career, the day that you finish uni. I would say to you that the best thing you can do is target an organisation that kind of aligns with your purpose and what you agree with and the values that you hold as well. So I'll use an example for myself. Like one of my first jobs was in construction, building these huge roads, and I was an environmental coordinator, which sounds like a great environment job. But yes, I was minimizing noise and I was minimizing erosion and all those small, tiny things that maybe are helping the environment. But the overarching purpose of that project was to build a huge road. On the flip side, working for Hunter Water as a civil engineer, that doesn't really sound that environmental. Mostly you think, oh, civil engineer, like they don't care about the environment. But the things I got to do because the company valued the environment meant that I was having a huge impact. So I would say follow what the company goes for and what they're doing, and don't find that one career or sort of, set yourself down one career.
Great advice. Anybody else wanted to add anything to that last question? We have got a lot of questions in the panel, which some of people have been already answering from our panelists, which has been great. Anyone else want to add anything before we go on to some of those questions? Great. If people have been writing things in, we'll try and answer them best we can. Some tips on how to boost our chances of employability for internships and graduate positions, even if we have a satisfactory cover letter or resume. I think we've had a lot of suggestions already about people, being persistent, contacting people, making sure that you've got as much information and experience that you've got, and it doesn't have to be paid experience, but yeah, seeking out those connections, going to HEI, join us. Be an intern, learn about other things, be part of what's going on in your community. Those sort of things can open up opportunities for internships and things. So,
if I may, Fiona, I've got something to add there. As an academic, I often get asked by students to be their referee. And if I don't know you, or if I haven't seen you in the last 6 months, I'm not about to make up stuff about the student. So I think a few of the panelists have actually said, do some volunteer work, speak to your lecturers, build a rapport with them. And then when you need a referee for your first job and you put down a lecturer, they can speak about you honestly, and we will be honest.
Yeah, choose the right referee. Someone who's going to say what you want them to say.
Absolutely.
If you don't get on with them, probably not a good idea.
I would also just say follow up as well. Don't just send your emails out into the abyss and wait for them to respond. Sometimes people get busy and they have a pile of resumes, and if you make a follow-up call, that just helps your name come into that person's memory when they do get to it. So things like that, and it also shows that you have personal skills and responsibility to be able to follow those things up. So that's just another bit of help.
Yeah, a few years ago, 2 years ago actually, when I was a panelist on one of these and we're in person, one of the university lecturers said, now, I encourage you all to reach out to these people who are sitting here. They're all available. You can take their cards. You can ask them for a coffee. And I guarantee hardly any, maybe 5 of you might do that. And I can guarantee 2 people contacted me after that. And I had a queue of people wanting to talk to me, but no one actually wanted to actually meet me after that. So go and make that opportunity. You're meeting these people here, try and find them on LinkedIn, or follow them up, or follow us up through HEI, and we can try and get you in contact with them if you wanted to have further connections.
Just to add to that, the story of my first job while I was still at university, I remember the day I missed the call that said, do you want to come in for an interview? And I knew because they had asked a lot of the people in my cohort for interviews as well. And I made sure that I followed up enough times because they were in no rush to call me back. So I made sure I followed up enough times that I did manage to catch them and had that interview. So if I didn't follow up, I wouldn't have got that first job.
Yep, following up. So we've got a few questions here about moving into ecology positions. What's your advice for tailoring studies interested in ecotoxicology and water environments? Anyone got any suggestions? Or also direction for biodiversity in volunteering work placements?
I can probably fill the biodiversity and work placement opportunities. I would, if you can, join a bush care group at the very least, as Fiona's kind of touched on as well. If you are interested in ecology and biodiversity, your plant ID and your flora skills really are, just with the way that our biodiversity assessments are set up these days, your flora skills are king. So if you can do anything to help you get ahead on those skills and get familiar with the plants that are in the communities that you're, or the plant communities that you're near, that will be a huge benefit. As far as volunteer and other intern opportunities, I think, sorry to put you on the spot, Fiona, but I think Fiona's probably a bit more well-placed to, yeah, make those recommendations through HEI or similar.
Oh, there's lots of groups around that you can volunteer for. Just look out for, you could join a Clean As and learn about clean energy and helping out with those sort of things, or the Wilderness Society, and there's tree planting groups, all sorts of things. Contact the council and ask what they have. There's lots of opportunities through them as well. So, any other suggestions for anyone? Okay, someone's asking, they're wanting to undertake an honours year to boost, is it recommended to undertake an honours year to boost your ability, or does an honours year not add much if we're wanting to undertake field work as a career?
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in again. On it, I think, I don't know how many unis still offer honours. Sorry, I'm not too familiar with University of Newcastle. Most of them seem to be masters these days. I would say it's a huge help to your technical skill set, and it is something that can differentiate you from your the others in your cohort. It also gives you an opportunity to follow a research project of your interest. So that gives you another way to individualize yourself and, yeah, make yourself stand out a bit. But it doesn't replace necessarily the benefits of volunteer work or any of those other opportunities that you could take up.
I'm writing some of that stuff now so that people can see it.
I think to add to what Jayme was saying, I can't speak from experience because engineering honours is compulsory, but I've had a lot of friends that did do environmental science, and Troy can probably say the final numbers, but they have said that it has helped them because out of the 300 or so people that graduate, there's a very small percentage that go on to do an honours year. And if you think about how small a year is in your whole career, you sort of have to weigh that up. It's not that much time and it does fly by. So, but like Jayme said, it absolutely does not replace work experience, but it is another thing to set you apart.
I could probably add a little bit more there, and Molly's absolutely right that Jayme as well. Honours gives you the edge over someone who hasn't done honours. It's another year of training. You've immersed yourself in a project. You've developed the soft skills that Rhys spoke about first, and I'm pretty sure all the other panelists have as well. And that's working independently, working in a team, time management, project management, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And these are all the things that quite often pop up as questions for the selection criteria. Provide an example where you have had to step out of your comfort zone, and how did you do it? What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? What was the result? That's the STAR method that most people will use when addressing selection criteria for a job. So I'm a big fan of doing honours. Newcastle does have an honours program. Yes, some universities have switched to a master's program, which is 2 years. Some people don't want to do another 2 years. It's a taster that it is research for you. Most degrees are 4 years, yet science, environmental science, and marine science, they're only 3 years. That extra year puts you at least equal or better footing than people you're competing against for those graduate positions.
Thanks, Troy. That's great. What kind of advice can you offer to a mature age person to successfully apply for a dream job?
I would say use all of that, I guess, wisdom and life experience to your advantage. The very first thing we learned in this seminar was the benefit of the skills, the complete other half of the skills you need to be successful in your career that aren't actually associated with the technical knowledge of your degree. And I think you've got a tremendous opportunity there to use that life experiences and the challenges of getting out of your comfort zone, anything really. I think that's a tremendous amount of life experience that would make you highly employable.
Yeah, I'd just add in there, like I did my master's, I was 25 when I started those, and I finished at about 28. And it was really only after that that my career really took off. So yeah, I wouldn't say that being a mature age student is a disadvantage at all. As Jacob said, you actually have a lifetime of experience that recent graduates don't have. And that is something that sets you apart. So yeah, just take advantage of that and use that to your, to make yourself stand out.
So I've got a question here about getting some work experience with Hunter Water for the Belmont desal plant. How can I pass on my resume? Molly, what would you say?
What's the best way to pass on my email address in this forum? Because we're always open to work experience. I don't think there's actually anything formal with Hunter Water, but my previous boss, who was the manager of civil engineering, basically any resume that came through him, he was like, yep, put them on board. So it honestly isn't that hard. You just have to reach out and
you can type your email address in the chat if you want to.
No problem.
Send it to everybody. Don't just send it to the panelists, send it to everyone.
Will do.
There you go.
If you're going to do work experience, make sure you line it up with your work integrated learning, which is now embedded in most programs. So you'll actually be contributing to your degree by doing that work integrated learning with Hunter Water or NGH. I've heard it's pretty good. You might want to go and do some work with them. You'll find all the panelists did some form of work integrated learning. And I know for Rhys, that's how he got his first job. They got to try before they buy, so to speak.
Yeah, that was exactly what Troy said. I organised my work experience, and then I think I was talking to you, Troy, at one of the student days, and you said, "Oh, are you doing the work integrated course?" And I hadn't even heard about it, so it kind of ticked both boxes because I organised work experience, then dropped off 10 units of my degree. And I just want to add what Molly said as well, in terms of often they're not a formal program as well. All it takes is that email to go through to the right person, and they go, "Oh, I've actually got a lot of work for an extra person," and they'll get you in. So I can guarantee there's lots of consultancies or councils out there who that may need an undergraduate and they're umming and ahhing, and all it takes is your email to pop up in the corner and say you're looking for work, and they go, bingo, the stars have aligned, and off you go. And all you need to do is get a foot in the door, and yeah, it opens up a lot of opportunities.
Okay, there's another question here about someone who's done a Master's in Environmental Science and Management. I'm thinking of doing it once I have completed my bachelor degree. Was it actually super useful to have the Master's for getting jobs? We've sort of covered that earlier.
I did that degree. I'm not sure if I could probably help with that question. So I decided to do that degree after I had been working in the industry for about 3 years. And although I'm an environmental engineer, I do have probably more of a passion for environmental science. So that's why I decided to enroll in that degree. And that degree is really good because it's online. You can do it outside of work. If you're really lucky like me, you'll have an employer that values those skill sets and will even help contribute to that, the funds of that degree. I wouldn't say it necessarily helps you getting an entry-level job. There's a balance between being overqualified and underexperienced. But I certainly think that if you're interested in pursuing more learning after a couple of years, I couldn't rate it highly enough. And I credit that degree that I only actually finished in May this year. It took me 2 years. And I credit that degree with helping me actually refine my personal environmental principles. and what it is that I actually, stand for. And as Molly talked about earlier, if I was going to look for a new job, I'd use those principles to find a company whose principles align with that. So I learned a tremendous amount about myself, I think, more than anything in that degree, and it was really valuable.
Excellent. I know someone has actually made a comment here about how they can get in contact with people, and no, Molly's put in her email address. If any other panelists want to put in their email address, you're welcome to do that. If you're happy for people to contact you to ask about or experience more, or whether they could get an 80-hour placement as part of your degree. And don't forget that most people, when you do those work placements, will be looking for the university to support you with your insurances, and they surely do. You just have to call them up and say, I want to do this work placement. Can you sort out the insurances for me? And they'll do it. But if you leave university and then want to get work experience, you don't have insurances. You have to pay for it yourself, and you can't just get free work experience as easily. So do it when you're at university. There we go, there's a few different email addresses in there. Any other things we need to cover? We need to finish off very soon. I'm just checking if there's anything else. There's a few questions that have already been answered. Please have a look at them in the chat if you want to know more about it. But I think we'll probably leave it there. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I always get so much out of these sessions, just hearing all of you, and the joy of you enjoying your jobs is wonderful to hear in the environment field, because there is such a broad cross-section of jobs, and when we decide who we should ask and how many different areas we should get people from, there's just so many options that we could choose. So each year we choose something a bit different. So you can always go back and watch some of our other sessions. We've got lots of other videos we've done with presentations, not just careers nights. We did a careers one this time last year, so you can find that online. But yeah, there's lots of other presentations and things you can learn on the HEI website and other places as well. So I'd like to just finish up by thanking the University of Newcastle and Troy particularly for hosting our webinar, and to the HEI committee for their organisation of the event. And thanks to HEI's gold corporate sponsor, MGH. If you missed some of this webinar or want to share it with friends, the recording will be available later with the link on our website. So just give it a bit of time, we will get it sorted. It sometimes takes a bit longer than other times. A lot of us are volunteers doing this. So in October and November, we'll be hosting some more webinars to promote National Pollinator Week, Water Week and Recycling Week. And if you have any ideas of things we should be talking about or people we should be putting up on our webinars, please let us know. We're always looking for ideas, and we're always looking for new committee members. We also have some interns, as I mentioned before. Shafan is one of our interns, and Angie has been helping with us today. She's one of our newest interns. So look out for those intern positions and for other opportunities for you to be involved. So thanks again to the HEI committee, MGH, University of Newcastle, and for all of you for joining us. We hope to see you again at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.